This video is sponsored by BetterHelp. So we are currently having an insane cucumber harvest right now in the garden, which means my kitchen has turned into a full-on pickle factory. We've been experimenting with different methods, different flavors, and just learning so much. And to be honest, the term pickle for many years just confused me because it can mean so many different things. So in today's video, my goal is to simplify that for you because pickles, we all know they're delicious, but to get high quality pickles from a store is very expensive. So as a home cook, it is so important to learn all of these different methods and techniques for making your own incredible pickles at home. So every year in the garden, of course, there's different ups and downs. Some crops do well, some crops don't do as well. This year, it's been very hot and humid, and it seems like the cucumbers just have been loving it. Look at this, all cucumbers on this trellis, thriving. And I grew 4 main varieties. You've got your classic Kirby, definitely the most popular pickling cucumber. I also grew gherkins for the first time. Classic gherkins, of course, get pickled super small like this. And for the last few years, I've been loving these little mini Persian style cucumbers. You're starting to see a lot more of these in supermarkets because they're such good slicing cucumbers. Also great for pickles. And then finally, I grew a few different varieties of these longer Japanese style cucumbers, which are incredible for slicing, so delicious just to eat raw. But from my experiments, they make incredible pickles as well. And as you harvest cucumbers for the first month, you're just so excited to finally eat delicious, fresh, raw cucumbers. That gets old pretty fast and the mindset moves into preservation. So before we get into the recipes for making pickles, I think it's important first to understand the different techniques. That's where all of this confusion comes from. And there's 3 main techniques or types of pickles. Number 1 is generally called a quick pickle, sometimes called a refrigerator pickle. And it's called a refrigerator pickle because they need to be stored in the refrigerator. They're not actually made for long-term storage. And to make them, you use a brine of water and vinegar in a certain ratio. Then you add salt and sugar, mainly to season the pickles rather than actually preserving them. Heat up that brine, and then the hot brine gets poured over the cucumbers to basically cook and infuse into the cucumbers, and then those go right into the refrigerator. Now, naturally, from adding vinegar and salt and sugar, which are preservatives, these pickles are definitely gonna last longer than a fresh cucumber in your fridge, but they're still best to be eaten within, say, a month or so. They're not meant for long-term storage. Which brings me into the next type of pickles, which are actually long-term stored pickles or canned pickles. Now this method is pretty much the same as a refrigerator pickle. You're making a vinegar brine, you're adding your salt and sugar. And instead of first heating up the brine, you pour it cold over your cucumbers, then those get sealed off, they go into the water bath, and when cooked at the appropriate heat and the right amount of time, you're killing off the potential for any unwanted bacteria. So when they come out and cool, they can actually sit at room temperature for say a year or 2. Now these types of vinegar brine pickles, we all love. They're absolutely delicious. They're probably the most sold pickles on the market, but outside of the vinegar you're adding, you're not getting the additional health benefits of the live probiotics, which brings me into the 3rd method, which is lacto-fermented pickles. And if you've heard the term sour or half sour pickle, that is a lacto-fermented pickle, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with already because I do a lot of fermentation on this channel. With these pickles, you're basically creating a brine between 3 to 6% salt. You're adding that to the cucumbers, letting those sit at room temperature to ferment. And as long as the cucumber is submerged underneath the water line, you've now created an anaerobic environment which inhibits the bad bacteria and encourages all of that lactic acid to build and create natural sourness. You don't need to add vinegar to get the sourness here. It's all happening through fermentation, through that bacteria building in your jar. And of course, the longer you keep them out fermenting, the more sour your pickles will be. I just want to take a quick minute to tell you about today's sponsor, which is BetterHelp. Now, I've been in therapy for over a year now. I wish I would have been doing it for longer because it has dramatically changed my life. And one of the main things I've personally learned through therapy is that as we're growing up, our brains are slowly being programmed to really survive and deal with whatever environment we're in at the time. And this early childhood programming can get very locked in to the point where as adults, we can be very unaware, sometimes fully unaware of how it's affecting affecting the way we deal with our feelings and just show up in life. So therapy for me has really been the process of understanding this early programming so I can see what's not actually serving me anymore. And I can be a little bit more in control of how I'm showing up, how I'm dealing with my feelings, which greatly affects my day-to-day life. Now, if you've never been in therapy, I can tell you from experience, it can be a bit overwhelming to get started, which is really the goal of BetterHelp, to make that process just a little easier. All you have to do is go to their site, answer a few questions, and you'll usually be matched with a licensed therapist with years of experience within 48 hours. So if you're interested in therapy, visit betterhelp.com/prohomecooks and get a special discount on your first month. Now back to some pickles. So you can see I've got a lot of different varieties of pickles right here, and this is just some of them. We've created an entire pickle fridge basically down in the basement. I'm gonna be showing you 6 specific recipes with a few experiments as well. And they're gonna range from the easiest or the quickest amount of time, and they'll continue to get a little bit more technical with a little more time involved as we go on. First up, we're gonna start with a classic. Garlic dill refrigerator quick pickle. This is the perfect place to start in your pickle journey. I've been honing in this technique for years. It's nearly impossible to screw these pickles up. I'm gonna be using these little gherkins pickles, which can go in whole, but some of the bigger ones I'll just slice up and I'll pack in my jar. I'll also add in a few cloves of garlic and some sliced onions. Of course, you could add whatever additional spices you want to these. And I almost forgot the dill for garlic dill pickles. I'm actually using dill flour since my dill bolted from the summer heat, but they'll give the same exact flavor. It's just some fresh dill in there. Then I'm gonna fill up the jar with some plain white vinegar right to the middle. And then the other half I'll fill up with water. Boom, that's a 50-50 ratio water to vinegar, which can be adjusted depending on how acidic you want your pickles. I'll dump that liquid right into a pan, add about 4 teaspoons each of salt and sugar, which is good for a 32-ounce jar of pickles. And think about the salt and sugar as more seasoning for the pickles, so you can adjust it again to your liking. And then I pour the hot brine over the pickles and boom, Dunzo. Throw those in the fridge. They'll continue to get better as they marinate day by day. We're trying a lot of pickles today. Okay, garlic dill.
So good.
A lot of garlic, a lot of dill, but like the right amount. It should be pungent aromatics on that, both garlic and dill.
So good.
It
tastes like a Burger King pickle.
That's a 10 out of 10 right there. A Burger King pickle. What's your ranking?
10 out of 10. Easy. These are all, honestly, these are gonna all be 10 out of 10.
Probably. Next up, we have one of the most delicious pickles of all time, the bread and butter. These are your very sweet and sour pickles. Great to eat raw, great on a sandwich, really good in chip form like this, sliced up. Since I'm gonna be cutting these up into little chip sizes, I'm gonna use these Japanese varieties, which have a really nice crunch to them. And I'm just slicing them up with my knife. I personally don't care if they're different sizes, but if you want them uniform, of course, whip out the mandolin. I'll add these to a clean mason jar. I'm also gonna slice up some onion as well and pop that in there just to enhance a little bit of that sweetness. And the brine ratio for these is simple, yet a little bit shocking. We're talking 1-to-1 sugar to vinegar. I'm gonna go with 1 cup of sugar and 1 cup of vinegar. And since that's very sweet, I'm just gonna water it down a little bit with a 1/2 cup of water, some salt, and then I'm gonna add in a bunch of black peppercorns and whole coriander, which is pretty traditional with the bread and butter pickle. I'll heat this up to a boil, and I'm just gonna let the brine sit for like a minute so I don't cook the pickles too much. Pour over that brine, let it cool, throw them in the fridge, and you're good to go. Bread and butter, I already know these are gonna be 10 out of 10. Carly first started experimenting with the bread and butter. I did not know how much sugar went into bread and butter. More of a syrup than
It's
a
like
brine.
1-to-1 water. That's why they're so addicting.
I will say, you're not drinking the syrup, but you need that amount of sweetness to get the bread and butter flavor.
I like wish they had a little spice. Like I'm getting like, it's like they're a little too sweet.
Actual chili or something to balance.
Yeah, but
they're crunchy.
They're super crunchy.
Oh hell,
yeah.
you hear that?
That's
What's your
nice.
rating?
I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10.
A 7 out of 10.
Which is shocking because bread and butter are my favorite.
I will say
Go with your gut.
9 out of 10. Although maybe would get over it a little bit because they're so sweet, but initial taste is amazing.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on to some lacto-fermented pickles. First, we're gonna start off with a very simple one, the half sour. Big time deli pickle. This is actually the full sour, which is gonna come right after. Just note the look of the brine. See how this brine is much more clear because it hasn't fermented as long? Pretty interesting. I'm gonna use whole Kirby cucumbers, classic for the half sour. I tried to pick them at a smaller size so they could just be stuffed right into the jar. Then it's very simple for here. You take out your scale and then you tare it or zero it with the cucumbers in the jar and add in your water to the top. Once you get that weight, I'm gonna be using a 4% salt ratio. Since these are half sours, you can go lighter on the salt ratio because they don't ferment as long, so they don't need as much protection from the salt. And here's what they look like after just one day. A slight shift in color, and that brine is still nice and clear with just some small bubbles. And I tasted these, and honestly, they were perfect after just one day, so they can get capped off and thrown in the fridge. So we got the half sours here. Chopstick. They should have that clear brine.
Yeah, bright
Look at
green.
that. That is perfect.
So good. So much like a cucumber though.
Yeah. When you don't have the sugar, it's a totally different experience. That's just salt and fermentation.
Yeah, but it's still so sweet because they're such a young pickle. It's a different kind of sweetness.
And there's no aromatics in there.
No aromatics.
I'm gonna give those 8.5.
I'm gonna give them a 9. 9 out of 10.
Which brings us right into the full sour. Basically the same thing with just a few small adjustments. I'm using true pickling cucumbers, both Kirby's and the gherkins. I'll slice the cucumbers in half. It's really just preference. Pack them in the jars. And this time for the salt ratio, I'm just gonna bump it up to 5%. So you get a little bit of extra protection from that salt as they ferment at room temperature for a longer period of time. And as far as how long you want to ferment them is really up to you. They should hit that full sourness around 5 days. But with lacto fermentation, there's so many different variables, so it's really just about tasting them and pulling them when they are the sourness level that you're looking for. This right here, I mean, that's what a half sour looks like.
Yeah.
That's what a full sour looks like. And you can see this was like a day and a half. These were 5 days, I think.
Maybe a week.
Yeah, I mean, that is a deli pickle. And that's a half sour.
Yeah.
Try the half sour. Still so good.
Still so good.
Maybe better.
Yeah.
I think better as
Better,
it sits.
yeah.
Still so crunchy. All right. Wow. Saltiness levels kind of seem the same.
Yeah.
It's almost like the salt feels like it ferments out a little bit. It's like it gets more subtle. Like it doesn't feel as salty as it ferments longer, and that's why you do that.
That's a good pickle.
I forget what we ranked those, but these are 9.5 for me.
Yeah, those are like 9.5. I think I gave these 8 or 9.
I'm changing it if it's 9.5 both.
Slaps.
All right, so this next one is very exciting. Complete experiment this year. Kimchi inspired pickles. I wanted to see what would happen when you added traditional kimchi brine to cucumbers and ferment them. So I chose just an assortment of different cucumbers from the garden. I cut them into little chips and stuffed those into a 32-ounce jar. For the paste, this is not 100% authentic, but I'm still hitting those traditional kimchi aromatics with ginger, onion, garlic, tiny slice of Asian pear for sweetness, some gochujang chili flakes, a little bit of soy sauce, some salt, and a little water to just help pulverize everything. I dumped all the cucumbers into a bowl, added in the paste, mixed that up, transferred it back into the jar, and then I popped a weight on top to make sure everything was submerged under the water line, which as you can see is not present now, but after a few hours, through osmosis of the salt, you can see how much moisture was pulled from those cucumbers, which created the perfect brine to lacto ferment for a few days. Kimchi taste test.
Yeah. Wow, these are the crunchiest of them all, for sure.
Which is crazy because they were brined in their own liquid.
Right, it makes sense. Like you didn't add any water.
I didn't add any water. Well, I guess that would make them crunchier.
Crunchier. These are so good.
So much better than I thought. Not many people are doing that.
Even though it still has a lot of water, compared to the cabbage, feels much drier, and so the flavor is way more intense.
Yeah, and I think just cucumber tastes better than cabbage a lot of times.
So
like,
good.
all right.
That's 10 out of 10 for me.
9 out of 10.
9 out of 10?
9 out of 10. And finally, this video would not be complete without true canned or jarred pickles in this case. So these are shelf stable. I could pop these on a shelf for the next year and really preserve that summer freshness. So in the winter, throw them in the fridge, open it, boom. delicious cucumbers. And honestly, I haven't really needed to make these in the past because I just wasn't getting enough cucumbers. But right now with the production, we're doing these every few days. And I'm just using a full assortment of whatever cucumbers are just ready to be harvested. So we'll call these the variety jars. And I first clean the jars very well. And then all of the cucumbers get sliced up into quarters. I pack them pretty tightly into the jars. This was around 8 pounds of cucumbers. I also shoved in some fresh garlic and onion from the garden. And for 4 of these 32-ounce mason jars, the brine was made up of 3 cups of vinegar, 3 cups of water, 1/4 cup of salt, and 1/2 cup of sugar. I also added coriander and peppercorn for spice, and I just whisked everything up until it dissolved. And then remember, it doesn't get heated up yet. That cold brine gets poured over the cucumbers, and then these go in a water bath at around 185 degrees Fahrenheit for 30 to 40 minutes. And then when they come out over time, you should hear that pop on the lid, meaning they have a proper seal and they're ready for long-term storage. We're kind of wasting a jar right now.
Yeah.
We need these for winter,
Well,
not
also,
for now.
I think it's good because we need to know that we sealed it properly.
There you go. That's a good point. You should hear a nice pop.
Oh, that's definitely sealed.
So these should taste very similar to
Garlic dill.
without the dill. It's kind of the same ratios of sweetness and salt. Oh, I like the quartered.
From being cooked in the hot liquid, they're like less crunchy.
That will be interesting to say. Still got some crunch.
They're so good.
I love those.
It's so interesting how this one and this one,
The garlic dill.
same flavors, different method, and they are shockingly different tasting.
Yeah. I mean, I am so happy with that as something that can get me through the winter.
100%.
Pop that open every time and I have no problem.
Yeah, that's so good.
9.5.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. Delicious.
So hopefully you learned a thing or two about pickles. If you want more fermentation, click this video right here. And if you're interested in therapy, visit betterhelp.com/LifebyMikeG or choose LifebyMikeG during sign up and enjoy a special discount on your first month.